Hello and welcome back to another episode of Flexibility with Fran. Today I will be doing a Q&A based on the questions that you asked me on Instagram and on YouTube, and hopefully this will clarify a few doubts or things that you may have not understood from previous videos, or just simply not sure about flexibility and mobility training. So let's get into it. I have a very short memory, so I'm going to read the questions out loud and then I will try and answer them in an order that makes sense, so bear with me whilst I scan for the first question. Let's start with what got me into flexibility and mobility training. I think this is a nice question. Way before I started climbing, I've always been interested in stretching. It is something that I used to do when I was like 15, 16 on my own. My mum had loads of books about static stretches, and I'd just always been interested in figuring out how much my body could do. So I did it for a while. And then about 4 years ago, I became a yoga teacher. So it wasn't until last year that I truly dived deep and kind of decided to do a little bit more of a research into it and train and practice with some mobility specialists. Thank you, Functional Range Systems, for bringing all of the knowledge to me. But yeah, so I think for my climbing, it was mainly because I felt like it was really hard sometimes to kind of reach for different positions or different holds, and I found my flexibility, even if it wasn't the worst, a bit limiting, and so I started training it in the hope that I'd get a bit better reach or just a bit better positioning on the wall. So this is definitely reason number one why I'm so keen on training it right now, to improve my climbing and my reach. Tip. Next question. What are the benefits of training flexibility and mobility? Well, apart from the obvious one of being able to maybe bring your body into more end range position. End range is simply a term that sort of sees the final bit of length of the muscles and the final bit of length of the tissues. There's also a sort of smaller kind of benefits, which are, for example, injury mitigation and body awareness. I think it's really interesting to notice that most of my clients that have been training with me so far find it really difficult to do the sort of mobility routine that I give them every day, and then by the end of the 12 weeks they find it really easy. And it's not because they've like necessarily built more muscle, but it's simply because they've built a lot more awareness. And in terms of injury mitigation, is definitely something that I'm more and more interested in, but it seems like the tissues that are getting injured overall, especially with sort of like high impact sports, is simply through force. So the more force you can apply during your training session into all of your tissues, not just the muscles, but also your connective tissues and your joints, so your bones, the less you're going to get injured around like your training sessions or your performances. So I found that was kind of like a really, really cool and interesting little added on benefit of flexibility and mobility training when done right, obviously. How and when to train flexibility training? This is a really big question, but I'm just gonna kind of like say what I think is the most useful for climbers. I know that most of you struggle to maybe fit in all of the training sessions, or you always have to kind of decide whether you want to go like training for fun or training for performance goals. So to get this straight, there's no really right or wrong way around training and flexibility, especially in terms of times, but you want to make sure that you have clear goals. So if your goal is to improve your technique or your I don't know, your strength in your climbing, then you definitely not want to use all of the sort of prime energy of your training session to train something that isn't as high on the priority list as it would be. So if that was a goal, I would say maybe go climbing first and then do the flexibility training afterwards. But if your main goal was becoming more flexible and more mobile, then I would say switch them around. Start with your flexibility training and then go into your climbing, knowing that your climbing is not going to be the best performance, but at least that you can combine the two and know sort of that you're going to get more out of the first session usually. If you have time, ideally, you could do 2 trainings in a day, leaving about 10-12 hours in between them. And usually they are the fastest sort of results that I see in clients, but I am aware that not everyone can train in the morning and in the evening. So if you have to choose to do them together, then you can follow what I just said. Otherwise, if you had a dedicated day for it, that would be the absolute best in my opinion. So maybe climbing, I don't know, Monday, Wednesday, and then training Tuesday, Thursday, or anything around at least 12-24 hours break would be great. Okay, I'm going to read this out loud because it's really long, but it's a really interesting question. If someone has a goal of improving multiple things, how many things do you suggest to work with at the same time, and for how long? Ooh, okay, so this is a big question as well, because it would entirely depend on what your multiple goals are. So if the goals were to all improve I would say like a function of the body, maybe in the back line of the body. So for example, you want to improve your hamstring length, but also your ankle dorsiflexion, so there's still some sort of calf involved, and then you want to improve your sort of flexion of the spine, then fantastic, you can definitely work on all of them together and superset them even, because everything will sort of function towards a similar function in the body. But if you would look into improve your front splits and middle splits at the same time, then I would say maybe it's a little bit too much. Unless you have been used to training in both lengths at the same time, then it's going to be really difficult for you to find like any progress in it, because you're going to put your same tissues into like a load, but in a different way, and then it's going to create a lot of strain onto the same tissue but in 2 different directions, which I think is a little bit too much. Obviously, as you progress with your flexibility, you can cycle through 2 or 3 goals, but if you're starting out, then just pick 1 or 2 goals that could be similar. For how long? I would say I'd stick with your training for at least 3 months. If you don't see any results within the first 3 months, depending on your age as well. I don't like doing any age discriminations, but it's true that the younger you are, the more responsive your tissues are. So if you're in your 20s, it will be maybe a faster progress than if you were in your 40s, but overall stick with at least 12 weeks and see where that gets you. If you've not noticed any changes in terms of performances of the flexibility postures that you want to achieve, then maybe it's worth looking into the different intensity or quantity of your sessions. If you noticed small improvement, then maybe you could stick to it for a little longer and then, change it. Oh, let's break it off with this question because I think it's quite nice. Thanks for asking. So are there any YouTubers you'd like to do a collab with in the future? Well, I mean, I'm just starting off, so it feels like a bit of a crazy goal to be able to collab with anyone else that maybe has a bigger channel. But I definitely would like to bring my girl Hannah, Hannah Morris, into my channel rather than being hosted by her, because we have a great vibe going on and it would be really nice to sort of like train her. But also I think I would like to maybe do like a session with Josh Rundle, or I would love to like do a session with Catalyst Climbing. Yeah, I don't know, yeah, it just seems like we would get along in like talking about training and goals and yeah. And then I had a shit loads of questions about hamstrings, which is exercises for hamstring strength and flexibility to improve helix rockovers. I have tight hamstring and that impedes my flexibility. Any tips to tackle it? And then, oh, that was it. Loads of questions. Anyways, I guess that we need to make a distinction between hamstring flexibility and hamstring strength, in the sense that you can definitely work strength and flexibility together. I think that they're fantastic, especially in a sport like climbing where we have to use our muscles and our flexibility actively most of the time. But there needs to be a distinction between being able to lengthen your hamstring and being able to shorten them. So for example, if we're looking at toe hooks, or if we're looking at bat hangs, if we're looking at anything that requires our leg to be fully straight, for example, also like a front split or a very small component of the middle split, then we're looking at training our hamstring at length. So you're extending and trying to kind of get more out of that tissue. When you're shortening your hamstring instead, you're sort of compacting and compressing, so you're contracting that muscle. And that, for example, what happens with heel hooks or rockovers or anything that requires you to sort of be able to transfer your weight or being able to pull your heel closer towards the bum, that works a different component of the hamstring. So a lot of more people are used to kind of being able to bend and squeeze harder than extend it all the way. So if that's the case, I would start by lengthening, creating more space in the tissues, and then strengthen through that range. If you were really struggling with pulling through the heel hooks, then maybe I would look at specific like drills, like Nordic curls to strengthen and to open up. You could look at single leg good morning pikes or both leg pikes. And then the opposite muscle, which is the recruiter one, which is the hip flexor, also needs to be trained for you to be able to fall forward properly. So yeah, hopefully this clarifies enough. But also, don't forget that the body has a lot more other components, so you have to be looking at your knee joint as well, you have to be looking at your hip health, and you have to be looking for rockovers or heel hooks at your ankle health as well. So the hamstring are definitely the sort of the motor, but we need to make sure that all of the other pieces of the car are working functionally as well. Otherwise, the hamstring could be producing an incredible amount of force, but then it doesn't translate into the other tissues because they're not strong enough. And usually that's when injury happens as well. So it's a complex world out there. If you have more questions, reach out directly. But I would say always start with creating a little bit of length, and then within the same session or within the first 4 weeks, then building strength through the length of the hamstrings. And now I am going to answer the last 2 questions. So we're nearly done, guys. Bear with me. Sorry if this has been a boring blab, but I think it's kind of cool to get to answer your questions. I'm very happy that you were all interested and asking so much. So, final sort of technical question is best exercise to incorporate into weightlifting program to improve climbing. I mean, what a big question again. Obviously, I would have to assess you personally to give you like more precise direction. But if I had to blindly choose a few exercises that you can do whilst you weightlift, would be sumo squats, deadlifts, and Cossack squats. Oh, and also like split Bulgarian lunges, yeah, they would be really good as well. Yeah, I think that's all I can say. Am I planning on offering flexibility and strength classes online? Kind of yes and kind of no. So I have been in sort of the movement industry for 4 years now. And I have worked out and trialed out a lot of different options online. At the moment, I don't have the facilities and the capabilities to be holding live classes. So that's not going to happen. However, something is in the pipeline that will be sort of accessible online. And it's going to be, I guess, similar to flexibility and strength classes. Yeah, I can only say that for now. So I hope you enjoyed this Q&A session. Thank you for watching till the end if you have. Let me know if you have any more questions. You can pop them down below, and then in the next few months when I do another Q&A, I can try and answer them all. And yeah, see you guys soon. Take care. Bye.